Hi, Amy. Can you hear me? I wasn't sure anybody would be here tonight. I appreciate you coming. Oh, good. My schedule's been crazy lately. My wife's getting called into work. I've got kids doing school stuff, and then their school is changing, and it's making it hard. Yeah. Oh, anybody? I've got one person on YouTube watching so far. Sorry if I'm having a conversation. So, Amy, they can't hear you on Zoom. It's totally separate. So, as far as YouTube is concerned, I'm over here talking to myself. Uh, you get to watch me sharpen my pencils for a second. Oh, and you know what, Amy? Oh, you're in my beginning class. I do the figure drawing first. Hey, Victor's here. No, because I've got Victor here. Victor, you're in. Are you in beginning drawing or figure drawing? I can't keep heads or tails of people. Who's in what class? I think Victor is in beginning as well. Yeah, so he's not in figure. He's also in beginning. So I think I'll just kick off with beginning drawing stuff. If you're watching on YouTube and you're a figure drawing person, you can come back at 8 and we will hopefully be ready to start talking figure stuff. All right. How did the texture stuff go for you guys? It seemed to go well. I don't know if you watched the video where I look at everybody's drawings and stuff, but I try to add those to the overviews these days. Yeah, I'll speak to that specifically here, and because I'm only going to give myself an hour. We may go over that. I'm only going to give myself an hour to work. Um, I'm going to focus in on something specifically. In fact, let me turn this off. I'm going to focus in on one of these three objects. Just going to crop it here. Um, and then I'm also going to use vine charcoal because I work a lot faster with vine charcoal, and we can get talking about shapes and stuff faster. All right, it is 7:04. Enough pencil sharpening time. So I only selected this bottle today, or else I'd already have it kind of mapped out on the page. So you'll have to bear with me as we draw it from scratch. But maybe it's a good refresher on how we go about drawing these. So as I look at this, it seems in the image to be kind of like tilted a little bit, leaning to the right as it goes up. I'm totally going to ignore that. I'm just going to draw it in as I know it should be, with the rules of symmetry and all of that intact. So first thing I'm going to do is just gesture this thing in by feel. All right, that's my rough gesture. And again, for especially non-figurative, so in a figure drawing class, you're looking for the flow of the pose and all this stuff. In just a basic drawing, You're just kind of like, how big is this thing going to be on the page? Where is it going to sit on the page? That kind of stuff. The gesture gives you that in, you saw it took all of like 10 seconds to do this. All right, so before I get much further in my gesture, I'm just going to take some quick measurements to sort of see where I'm at. And I'm going to give myself a lot of leeway here because it is just a bottle. It could be, the proportions aren't super important unless you're trying to make it be like a wine bottle or a jar of syrup or something. If it's a specific bottle, then you have to pay attention to those specific proportions. This is a wine bottle, so it is a lot taller than it is wide. Once, twice, 3 and a bit. So boom, once, twice, 3 and a bit. I'm close enough. Do as I say, not as I do. Close enough is okay, but be more particular than that. There's a close enough that's like, it's within reason and it's going to be convincing. That's what I mean when I say close enough. Not like I don't care what size it is. That's not what I mean by close enough. All right, so there's the rectangle that lives in. I'm going to figure out how tall is the stem, like the neck of it now. And one neck goes once, twice, 3, and some. So I need some measurement like that goes once, twice, 3, 4. That's not big enough. Double check my measurement. Neck. One neck goes once, twice, 3, and just under 4. So I need something where I go once, twice, 3, and that's like a half. Move this finger up just a little bit. Once, twice, 3, and almost 4. So that's going to be my height. Right there. That's the measurement where it goes once, twice, 3, and just under 4. So that's going to get me close enough. So now I know that's where my neck ends. It's like the joint where the neck comes down and starts heading off to the edge. Now to build this bottle out, I'm just going to sort of imagine it to be kind of 3 different things. It's like a cylinder for the bottom half, which is just going to use my sides of my rectangle with an ellipse at the bottom. So I've got to make sure that bottom is rounded, and I'll straighten that out in a minute. When I get to the top of this bottle, if I ignore the fact that there's shoulders and just imagine the shape that those could be, I actually can get those shoulders by just drawing a sphere here. So it's like my bottle goes up and then goes in towards the neck at a similar rate. And instead of trying to do one side and then the other, I'm just going to do a sphere because that's going to be a little more economical. I won't use this or that. That's just going to be how my shoulders get made. All right, before I go too much further, I want to get some symmetry here, and I think I'm going to use a ruler for that. So I've got pretty much 6 inches on the dot. So I got 3 here, and do I have it? Or is it in my office? I have a T-square, and if you haven't used a T-square, it's really helpful. I think it's still in my office or somewhere. I can't readily grab it. If you have a T-square, you can hook it on the bottom of the page here, and it will give you perfect vertical, perfect vertical, perfect vertical. It's a really quick and easy way to do that. I'm just going to rely on my ruler instead. I'm going to call that my vertical axis. And if you're careful with a ruler, you can have like a perfectly straight, perfect vertical with a nice thin line. I'm using vine charcoal and swinging from my shoulder to get a vertical line. So it's not perfect. But we're more worried about the surface in this demonstration than, I don't know, the symmetrical buildup. You want yours to be nice and symmetrical though. Again, do as I say, not as I do. They taper, the neck tapers a little bit towards the top. And what I need to remember here is that everything that happens on one side of that axis happens the same on the other side. So I'm going to go centimeters for a second. 4. So this should... Now, this bottle, the top of it, if you're looking over here at the reference, the top of it is really flat because that's right about where my eyeballs are. The bottom is pretty round. The top is pretty flat because, as we recall, ellipses get flatter and flatter and flatter as they get to your eye level. So there's my eye level. As I move this down, you see more and more and more and more of the top of that ruler. The ellipses do the same thing in this bottle. So I see more of the ground part of that bottle than I do the top edge. All right, bearing in mind that I will need to work on this symmetry quite a bit more before it's perfectly symmetrical. I don't want to really spend our time doing that. So I'm going to move on to looking at the values in this thing as soon as I get this neck described. There are these little contours and stuff happening up here in the neck. You really want to be on the lookout for that kind of stuff because it's those little things that are going to add the believability. Like that, those little jut outs and little things that are happening across the bottle. If I miss that stuff, if I just go like that, that's just, we're going to be going blah, blah. That's just not very believable. If you think back to our positive negative assignment with the ink and the positive shape, negative shape, the positive shape here, that silhouette really does a lot of communicating about the neck of that bottle. All right, and I'm working on gray paper here just because the values are faster to build on a gray paper as well. For this project, for this drawing, you can do white paper also. I notice on this bottle that it doesn't come straight down to the ellipse and to the ellipse bottom. It kind of has this bend inwards, and I'm going to get that on the other side too. There's like this outward bend where it sits on the ground. All right, now I need to decide what's happening value-wise here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm not going to get hung up in the specifics of every little thing that's happening. It's really easy to see all that shiny stuff, the dirty grunge from the old label that's on this thing, all of that, and to be like, oh man, and start really getting nitpicky. I'm not doing that yet. I'm going to do big basic shapes first. And the first thing that I'm going to grab is this stripe. Here I just have the vine charcoal on its side. So I have a choice right now. I can decide. So one thing that I'm noticing is that my stripes, when I get the thick enough stripe, it doesn't really come out the bottle the same as what I see on the screen. The stripe is actually a little higher on this bottle. I could bring the tabletop down to try and make up that difference. I could move all the stripes and try to get it closer to what I see up there. I am going to not split the difference. I am going to use what I see in the image to dictate what I do in the drawing. So I'm going to stick with the stripes I have. They're roughly the same as what's in the image, maybe not quite. But I'm going to use the image to decide what to do once we start filling the values inside the bottle. Right, and your drawing is going to have several things. I think there's 3 things per reference, and they're all quite similar, but maybe one of them stands out to you better than the other. I don't know. Again, this is really kind of loose right now. I'm just getting the real generic sort of overarching stuff in. And I kind of like to make this mess and then tame the mess. If you're much more precise and clean than I am, you might like going in and mapping things out very carefully, getting down to the shapes very carefully. I tend to do that later in the drawing process. I sort of fill value on the page. Then I go back in and I use my eraser and white stick and charcoal pencil to kind of finesse those details later. All right, so what's happening in the bottle? Ooh, I got a cast shadow here. Let me get that first. One thing I know about cast shadows is they're sharper as they get closer to the object. So eventually I'm going to be playing that game too, where I let the cast shadow kind of blur out far away from the object and be nice and tight up next to it, because that's going to say light source when I do that. All right, inside the bottle, what do we have? There's a weird thing happening where I can see the cast shadow in this bottom edge of the bottle. So there's like this whole stripe here is dark. And it's kind of weird, but it is what I see. So I'm going to put it in. One thing I'm thinking right now, though, and if you watch the videos yet, you'll have heard me talk about this. I do not want this cast shadow to just go uninterrupted right into the glass bottle. Even if that's what it looks like is happening in the image, I'm desperately looking for a reason to break that continuous line there. In the image, I noticed the cast shadow is actually offset from the dark shape inside the bottle. So I'm just going to remind myself of that right now. And I'm going to play that up later. Because nothing is going to make your glass, or whatever your transparent thing is, feel unconvincing, like something passing through it and just having no effect whatsoever. That's especially on a curved piece of glass like this bottle is. All right. And again, I'll get these particulars later. I'm just getting big shapes right now. It's kind of a thin light shape there. Then it jumps up and up into dark there. It's kind of like a zigzag zig down through that bottle. The things I'm going to be paying real close attention to in this bottle as well are these edges. Like I really want to sell those edges. Out here in the front, I kind of have some leeway about where things maybe are. On the sides, I want to be nice and careful that I get those shapes correct. Zig, shelf down to a curve. Little stick up there. it turns into chaos right through here. So I'm going to have to edit some of these shapes just for the stuff that's most important. But that's okay. And the top of this, it's like dark on this side, and then it's darker along here with some flyouts. Fly out, fly out. Swoop down. All right, that's kind of the general. If I ignore the texture of the sticker, hey, William, nice to see you as well on YouTube. If I ignore the grunge, and I'm going to ignore the grunge totally, the whole drawing. I don't want to spend the time in this demo getting all those little grungy spots in. So I'm going to say that's a dirty bottle and it could just as well be clean. So I'm going to leave those. I could add them later if I wanted to. Right now, what I care about is these stripes and how they go wonky as they go through the glass, the edge, and sort of the overall dark. So I noticed the green stripes in the bottle. It's the green bottle darkening these white stripes behind. Now for me, this is gray paper, so I can kind of just leave things gray in the bottle, and I think that's probably what I'll do. And then I can add white back here to really make this bottle go darker. And then I can add white to the bottle to really give that shine, the reflections. All right, so I have general, just very generic value on the bottle. And you can see it's kind of starting to look like it might be a little bit transparent. We still have a long ways to go. So right now in my mind, I'm saying whatever I do in the bottle for now is going to be charcoal and eraser. I'm not even going to think white stick. The only thing, and in fact, the only thing on this bottle that gets white stick is going to be the shiny spot, those window reflections, maybe some of these vertical reflections, definitely some shine up there at the top, maybe some shine down here, basically the shiny spots, because I want that bottle to read darker than the stuff that's around it. All right, I'm going to get a little more specific now. This is all vine charcoal still. I'm going to come in with my charcoal pencil now and just be a little clearer and maybe start defining some of these still larger shapes like the light to dark switching, but I'm going to define the edges a little bit more where they seem to be defined. And that's largely like up here in the neck. And then there's some specifics down here I want to get. I just need to avoid lines here because if you look at the image, it's kind of broken there. It's kind of come and go. So I'm going to do that with the pencil, adding value rather than drawing a line per se. All right, I'm going to be as particular as I can be. And in fact, bear with me. I'm going to zoom in on my other screen just so I can do this top section justice. If you're not zooming in on the images, you're really setting yourself up for difficulty. Oops. Right now, I have one monitor and the entire monitor is just this neck of the glass bottle. If we were in real life, you'd see it a little better. And this is where I can tell that the top of this bottle is rounded. So there's a little rounded top there. I'm going to try to draw. Normally when I'm drawing, I don't care where my head is, but I don't want you to stare at the back of my head while I draw. So I'm going to try to keep my big head out of the way. That's what I'm saying. And you'll watch me do whatever I do on one side, I'm going to do on the other because I trust where I put things before symmetrically. Now, if I do, because I know this is perfectly round, it's manufactured in, symmetrically and all around axial symmetry or whatever. If I have a slant down here, I'm going to have a slant down there. Straight line down there, straight line down here. Cut in there, cut in there. Little bulge, I'm going to call it there and there. This is always the dodgiest part for me. So shoulders. Once I've done those, I'm going to step back and be like, is that reasonably symmetrical? It's pretty close. This is where I would be like, okay, I need to get I could redraw my rectangle. I could reform anything I needed to if I found that something was leaning or like one of these shoulders was taller than the other or something. You really want to try to work to get these things symmetrical, accurate with each other. All right. There's a lot going on in this neck. There's a bunch of details. I am going to edit out the stuff that doesn't matter, so to speak. So I have a dark edge, then it lightens up, then I have a dark edge again. It shoots this way. This is some small stuff. Let me see if I can get you closer. Maybe the added benefit will be that my head is not in the way. There we go. Dark edge. This looks kind of zigzaggy this way, so I'm going to make sure my marks go that way because that'll just feed that sense of the roundness of the bottle. Soft edge here. Now this is exaggerated. These are usually darker than that. And one thing that's happening is a lot of the stuff, like the same like dark edge, light spot, slightly dark spot, slightly lighter to this wide thing. It's just repeating down the neck. It just tends to be either thinner or thicker, but it's kind of the same story all the way down. Gets wide again, and then it gets real thin. Down at this neck, things are really thin. Now I'm going to do something here in a minute that I like to do. You don't have to do, but you might find it helpful. It's going to seem like I take a step backward. And I've got some editing to do right here because that's a pretty heinous section of this bottle. But for this part, if I just go like that. It seems like I just messed stuff up maybe, but it just kind of like bedded all of that, all those values together. So now I can come back in with my eraser and clean this up. And on the other side, and then I can say, okay, I still get a sense that there's like these vertical stripe things here, but now I can say which one is more important than the other. And I think this one on the very edge is kind of more important. There's like some background white stuff or something reflecting in that. The nice thing about toned paper, and this is why I really enjoy working on it, is this is starting to look like a light spot, but it's still, you know, middle gray of the gray paper. Let me grab the chat here. So am I using soft, medium, or hard charcoal? That is a fantastic question, Victor. I used soft vine charcoal to do the original sort of all that sketching stuff. This pencil is a medium charcoal pencil. So it's the, if I extend it a little bit, it's 2B medium, which means I can go way darker than this as well. I tended to do quite a lot of stuff with medium, with the medium charcoal, and then I will come back with the dark charcoal later. In fact, so here's a different brand of charcoal, the Derwent. This is dark, and then the carbon pencil. It'll give me, I don't know if you can see it on the camera very well, but that just went really quite dark from where I'm sitting. I do want that secondary one in there just a little bit though, so I'm going to put that in with my eraser. Again. With my eraser, this is why kneaded erasers are so nice. I'm just forming it into this thin fin and then just pulling down that line. I'm going to go ahead and start these reflections. There's like two stripes headed down. It looks like actually in the image that I'm looking at, it looks like a bunch, but I'm just going to edit it down. I'll come back with a pencil and put those in properly. Oops, shake you guys up. All right, this shoulder, we have some crazy stuff happening. We have what looks like, and I need to zoom in so you folks can see it on how zoomed in I am here. Let's. Forgive me while I finagle this. Got to get it to where it's big enough that you can see it, but you can also see the drawing. All right, so I'm just going to hold for a second and try to figure out what is going on through here. What am I looking at? And in the center of the bottle there, I see the stripe that's behind the bottle. But when I get to the edges, it's like zebra striping. And so in the middle is the stripe as I see it through the bottle on the back side, getting distorted by the glass. On either shoulder is where I even catch a little bit of blue to it It's a reflection of the stripes that are out here off to the sides of this bottle, sort of reflecting off the shoulders and back at me. So do I need to do everything I see? I'm going to say no, but there's a few things I do want. I want to get that wavy, I want to get a couple of stripes that wave through this shoulder. I want to get the same thing over here. And then I want to get some of this dark sort of zigzag island as well. So that's going to be kind of the three things that I shoot for. It just in this shoulder area. And then there's that really hot glowing highlight right here. And then it shows up again out here on the bulge. I'm going to make sure that shows up, but I'm going to save that till later because I can add that with white charcoal pencil. White new pastel is fantastic for those shiny spots because you press it on top of charcoal or pretty much anything, it's going to leave a really strong mark. Maybe that's what I'll do with the highlights so you can see just how strong it is. All right, enough talking. We got to draw. I feel comfortable making these lines a little darker because I know the shape that they belong to is pretty dark. This is where, if you were so inclined, you might want to get a blending stump. You can really make this kind of stuff smooth, but it's not totally necessary. So this first stripe seems really dark, but then they kind of lighten up as they go in, it looks like. So I'm going to start letting these ones just bleed off. That's kind of what I wanted for that shoulder. You guys are getting the I don't know if you can hear my kids in the background, you're getting the pre-bedtime rambunctious stuff going on. The trick in this stuff is not making these value switches so extreme that everything is just chaos. You know, you have to kind of prioritize what you're doing. And I will admit to a bit of hasty work here. Like I'd be more comfortable if I were drawing this for my own self. I'd be going a lot slower. And I may not get the whole rest of this bottle in for that fact, because we're 20 minutes out. I think I'm going to devote that to this. Maybe I'll zoom out a little bit and get the top half of the bottle. I'm going to work that in just a little bit. That's something that you can get pretty, should I say, addicted to. smearing with your fingers is something that you can overdo really rather easily. So try not to do it forever. It can be good in the preliminary stages to kind of work things together, but if you do it too much, you run the risk of things just falling apart. This is cool. Some of these stripes are going up this way into the bottle, but right here, this is a dark stripe reflecting off the back, and it's going this way, but also down that way. This center part of the bottle here is where I see the room. Like if I really look closely at that dark shape, it's actually the rest of the room all around. If you get a lot of paper texture like this, so here I've just laid this value down with the pencil on its side pretty quickly, but I have all this paper texture, and I think we may have talked about this in a previous thing as well, but if I take vine charcoal on top of that other charcoal and just throw it in there and give it a bit of a smear, it really takes a lot of that paper texture just out of the picture. And you can still erase it. You can still work it pretty well. So vine charcoal can really help you smooth things out if you want stuff to be, if you want it to be smoother. You'll notice I'm going pretty dark here. This is the area that I have identified is probably some of the darkest stuff in the drawing. So I'm going to feel okay making it nice and dark. And I'm not going to do all of these stripes because you can, obviously that's going to take forever, but you get the idea. I'm trying to turn this into a border between shapes instead of this light dark, or rather instead of a line, sorry. So anything that looks like a line here, I'm just kind of growing it into this dark shape. I can do that same trick with the vine charcoal here. Now I lost something when I did that, when I did this stripe, and I want to point it out because it can scare you if you let it, but it doesn't need to. My shoulder of the bottle that I drew in with the line disappeared when I did that. Like, where did it go? Like, my edge is missing. I'm going to come back with my eraser and redefine that edge. So I have this light. shape that swoops in. And then on this dark stripe, I have just a little glow on the edge there. Then this comes back and I actually don't need a line right there. Right, so just that, those shapes are going to be enough to show us that shoulder of the bottle. Maybe ease up that dark stripe just a little bit. So that's, believe it or not, that's going to be more visually convincing in the long run than keeping that hard line there for as long as possible. How are we doing? We're doing okay. So I'm going to ignore the lower part of this bottle, as I said, as I'm looking at the time. Just not going to be able to get to it this time. But it's very much the same process. Of course, just doing those big general areas first and then working the specific little shapes afterwards. This is rather light. This might even be a candidate for some white stick later, this shoulder. I don't know yet, we're gonna see. I said white stick and then I had to reach in my supplies for some white stick. All right, is there anywhere else that I need to erase? I'm going to erase here where that highlight is. So there's one right here. I'm just going to keep reforming my eraser and dabbing at it. And it's not going to seem to do much at first, but eventually I'll get back to the gray paper. There's a highlight there. And there's one right out here as well. Both of these are going to be really nice to get because it's like the highlight from where things are tucked in. So you get a highlight where something bulges out at you, like this, the extreme edge of this shoulder of the bottle gives you a highlight, but also where it goes back in and tucks into that little crease, you get another highlight. And where else do we see them? Up here. There's one there and one there. All right, let's do some white stick. I have a Conte here that I think I'm going to do the stripe in the background with. And then I have a new pastel here, which I'm going to do the highlights with. If you rub Conte into existing charcoal, it kind of makes this grungy, muddy charcoal look. I don't really want that in the bottle, so I'm going to leave the Conte out of it. It doesn't sit on top as well. The new pastel, it's going to sit on top and shine like those, like I want those highlights to do. William asks, is that a kneaded eraser that you use? It is, in fact, and I'll be honest with you, I primarily use a kneaded eraser. The amount of times I use any eraser that's not this is 1% of the time or less. And I draw with my eraser quite a lot. There's just, for what I like to do, for the way I like to do it, I haven't found anything that works that's as versatile as this kneaded eraser. Rarely, like in the texture video, we talked about making thin lines. Like if I need to do a repeated hatch mark with an eraser, then I'll use like a harder rubber eraser. Otherwise, yeah, it's just kneaded eraser only. This is Conte on its side. You can really cover a lot of ground with this Conte stick on its side. Use my right hand here. I'm a lefty, but I'll use my right hand just so I don't get in the frame. And I'm kind of, you can see how I'm pinching this right up here towards the edge. I'm focusing on this edge and trying to cut in that background stripe right next to the bottle to get a nice firm border, and then it just kind of bleeds off as it gets overshot it right there. It bleeds off as it goes away, and then once I'm out here in the stripe, I can just kind of swipe it in, so to speak. Here's where you need to be careful. If I don't like the paper texture here, there's really only one thing I can do, and that's come back with a clean finger maybe and just get rid of some of that mark activity. This is totally optional. It can look fine without this. That just kind of gets rid of some of that annoying paper texture. If you have a really nice sheet of paper, it's less important, because that paper texture is kind of it'll look nice and classy, and it'll also say I don't know, it's an elitist move. Drawing people will be like, oh, is that a sheet of Stonehenge? And they'll see the paper texture and go, oh, that's nice paper. And you can kind of, I don't know what, flex your paper buying muscles. All right, so now the bottle itself is darker than the surroundings. So now it's starting to seem like it's a frosty surface with something behind it. I still have that circle from my initial gesture that's kind of bugging me, so I'm going to just minimize it a little bit. And my axis as well. All right, so before I put the super shiny spots on, I'm going to be like, is there anything that would warrant some Conte? Like, I don't want it to go full bright. I just want it to be lighter than maybe the gray paper. And I think the answer to that is yes. So I have this on the side here. I'm going to do that in Conte just because that stripe is pretty light. Oh, and I overshot before. Let me clean up my mess with carbon pencil. This little overshoot, I just go with my carbon pencil. What mistake? Never happened. Anything else? Yeah, maybe some on this side too. These are interesting, these reflections. It's like a hard edge on the bottom, and then they shoot up, and they're not as hard of an edge really anywhere else. So I'm going to get that in the drawing. We've got shelf, drop down to another shelf. And they're kind of come and go. They're not perfectly regular. And they stop. Oh, they actually stop a good deal. I made them a little wide and a little tall. They'll be all right. there's like 4 or 5 little hits here. 4 or 5 little hits there. And a little bar there. Maybe another bit of Conte on this far edge. I feel like this could be a little more prominent, that little angle. So I'm just going to erase back to the gray there. Okay, now I'm going to do some new pastel. And there's really 4 places that I'm going to use this. Strong highlight here, strong highlight there, 2 little strong highlights up in that part of the bottle. And then we'll kind of be there. This bottle will be pretty well on its way, I should say. So let's start at the top. All right, where do I put this? If I look at the reference image, you can't see it. There we go. If I look closely, and this is like observation, you really need to be careful observing. It's not right at the very top. It's down just a tiny bit. If I put it right at the very top, I stand a chance of flattening the top too much. It might be fine, but for the image that I'm seeing, for what I'm looking at, it's down from that top edge just a little bit. I don't know if you can see the difference between the Conte and the new pastel there. The new pastel just makes that far stronger mark. Then I have another one just down below it. Looking for a corner on this new pastel to make a strong mark with. Down, I'm going to leave those be. I'm going to leave those be. I have a strong one here. And another one out here. Sometimes I'll do that, so I'll make my highlight, then I'll work the highlight into the surface a little bit. So this is what that looks like up close. And then I'll come back and just add it again on top of that. That can really help integrate what you did into the surface. You don't want to get too carried away, but that little bit of halo there really helps sell the surface. Like it feels shinier than if you just made it a circle with no feathered edge. Kind of like I did up here. I did like a fake feathered edge with that swirl. Because this is a strong highlight, now I won't do it on these other ones really, but because this is a strong highlight, you can sort of feather that edge a little bit, restate. You get a decent sense of it feeling like it's part of that surface as well. Watch out for your hands, they're dirty. Then I can come back and be like, you know what, it's like darker, this dark shape is darker. I can clean up some hard edge issues that I might have. This is just adding clarity. I'm not really getting too carried away here. But I'm just adding just a little bit of extra clarity to the drawing. All right, the one thing that we didn't, that's going to do it for beginning folks. I know that was rushed. Hopefully you found it at least helpful. There's a few things I want to talk about before we move over to figure stuff. And that is pay attention to the edges. So if we had gotten down lower, I would absolutely have talked about how this stripe, it hits the bottle and it jumps. And then it's got this wiggle all the way down. And then it hits the edge of the bottle and it swoops down like that. If you watch the instructional video, that sort of, that offset. So like here comes the stripe. As soon as it hits the edge of the bottle, it offsets like that. That refraction is huge in making the edges, in selling the bottle, right? So we would have gone into that a little bit more. So like for instance, this edge here would be, it would be headed down like that. And then I've got more reflections of stripes on the edge, but that refraction down is huge in making something feel transparent. And then these sort of like lighter bits that sit on the surface are huge, making it feel reflective, right? Along with the shapes of everything distorting appropriately. So it's a lot on your plate. It's a lot to think about. Please pay attention to those videos. Make sure that you're on your A game. It stands a chance of really coming off well if you give it the time and care that it needs. It seemed like there was something else I was going to say, but it escapes me. So let us switch gears. Amy and Victor, thank you. Hopefully that was helpful. Oh, no worries. If you run into issues or you have something specific to your drawing that you want to input on or anything, don't hesitate to shoot me a message or anything. As long as it's not like 11 o'clock the night it's due, then I'll see it and have a chance of replying to it. So, but that's what, yep. We'll see you, Victor and Amy. Figure folks. Let me tear this out. All right, on to figure drawing. I'm just going to use gray paper for this as well. Turn this off. We're talking hands and feet. All right, and I picked a different, so the instructional video is, it's like the front of a hand coming towards you with like the pinky up. So in this one, I wanted to do the other side of the hand so you get a different view, like me breaking down a different view. And then we'll try and get to a foot as well. I'm not going to do a lot of rendering on this one. And for your project, you don't necessarily need to render unless you feel like it's really going to help sell what you're trying to do, which it very well may. Mainly what I'm going to concern myself with for this drawing is the structures and sort of how I go about thinking about hands and feet when I draw them. All right. Hi, Kayla. I'm getting the sense that evenings work better for some people. I don't know if that's true, or if we just got lucky. It's good. I'm going to have the timing of everything figured out right about the time we all go back to in-person classes. And I'm going to be like, well, I was starting to get it figured out, but I can't bug you guys over your shoulder nearly enough. All right. First item, you saw me do this first. So the first thing I noticed about this reference, horizontal makes more sense just because of the way it's put together. I'm not going to do the whole arm, but even the hand itself is a little wider than it is tall. I'm working on 18 by 24 gray paper. I'll be honest, one of the great shames, I think, of this semester has been 11 by 14. It's so small. 18 by 24, when you start drawing with that shoulder, it feels a lot better. But it is what it is. If you have 18 by 24, feel free to use it. That's what I'm going to do my demonstrations on because it's easier to see and it's easier to film and it's easier for me to draw this size. All right, so hand. So this is the equivalent of a gesture drawing of a figure, right? I'm just trying to find, I feel like the arm has this kind of swooping flow to it. We tumble around in some fingers here and we have another little hook coming out the end. That's pretty much it. I could do a more sustained gesture if I want to find some more specifics. Like maybe I want a sense of where that wrinkle is, who knows. But this is really just giving me, does it feel like the hand? So when I look at the gesture, does it feel kind of like the hand that I'm referring to? Seems to. And remember, for your drawings, you'll be kind of telling a story. You've got hands and feet all in the same drawing. So really, I'm just kind of drawing a hand here, but yours ideally will be involved in saying something a little more. I guess this one could be like come here as part of a, some other thing. All right, that feels pretty good to me. I've got like the bulk of the hand. It's not perfectly centered. It's kind of off to the left, almost in like a rule of thirds situation. I feel pretty good about that. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing this. I'm still in vine charcoal. I'm going to start drawing things in more of a straight line, or maybe get more a sense of the contour. And then I'm going to measure and kind of get things tightened up before adding my final sort of contour line here. So what I'm looking for in this hand, as always, I'm looking for like this box of the hand first. The fingers are just chunks of stuff. I'm not concerned about that right now at all. I am concerned about what the hand is doing. I am concerned about what the wrist is doing. And I am concerned about what this thumb chunk is doing first and foremost. So hand, it's like I have to ask myself what parts of this, if this is a box, what parts do I see? And if I were to just transpose this up here in the corner, like what do I see here? I see some knuckles there. And I see the knuckles, and it's like if my hand is a box, it's like, what's the best way to, like, here's one side, we'll say back and front, or back, front, side. In between the fingers is another side, like the flat spot there. I do see that flat spot here, kind of like that. I see that pinky knuckle, and I do see this side of the hand too, and this bottom of the hand. So front and side. So loose perspective wise, the hand is kind of like that. And then the thumb box is what I'm going to call it. What do I see of that? I see mainly the front of it here. It's kind of like a triangle up there. Maybe just a little bit of one side. Maybe it's a little bigger. So that's kind of what the thumb is doing. This pad of the thumb is doing. And then I've got like my thumb here that's attached to it. These are being blocked by knuckles. So then I have like, let's just say this is my grouping of fingers. And then I have the one finger sticking out. Then I have the wrist coming down from there and down from there. So that's kind of like the break apart of what this hand is doing. This is like the three fingers, that pointer finger. We saw the initial box of this part of the hand, and then the thumb box as well. So that's what I'm going to be thinking of as I put this together. I don't need to draw that stuff out. I'm probably not going to draw all that stuff out, but I am thinking of those as distinct parts of the hand. And here I'm just doing measuring. So I'm like taking like this angle here and just comparing it to the reference. By the time I get to this little angle change, so the wrist comes up and kind of butts into the pad, this fleshy pad of the hand. Where is that happening relative? If I go straight up with it, it's happening like right in the middle of this pad. So pretty close. I have three knuckles, and they kind of, it's like that to the pinky knuckle, so that's too steep. It's kind of like that to the pinky knuckle, and then they swoop up like this. Knuckle, knuckle, knuckle. I realize this looks like chaos right now. Hopefully it won't for very long. If I go up this, so if I go up this finger, this birdie finger that's bent, and just carry on, it is continuous with the pad of the hand. So that's a nice little flow of continuity to get. Somewhere around here, the birdie finger stops. And where does it stop? Pinky knuckle, which is right below the thumb. So this probably needs to be back a little. The actual thumb here, and this there. I'm trying to figure out where this bent pinky ends. It's almost dead center. It's roughly what I get. There's so much stuff right here that I'm not trusting, but when I measure it, it's coming out accurately, so I have to trust it. So I'm going to trust it till I'm given a reason not to. This is all in vine charcoal, by the way, so I've got plenty of possibility of changing stuff. Now I'll get these knuckles in. It's like the top of this finger is leading me down to this knuckle. See how tall is that finger? It is about the same as this birdie. Okay. You really want to avoid making your fingers feel too sausage-like. So these ones are feeling pretty clunky right now because, well, they are. Right, I'm still headed towards the contours on them, and I'm still kind of feeling my way along, so to speak. Okay, it's at this point that I'm going to say, is there anything bugging me? And the answer to that is, yeah, well, there's quite a lot bugging me, as a matter of fact. But are there any measuring issues or changes or things that really need to be addressed? And if I look, I'm not digging the sharpness here, but that'll go by the wayside. What I want to make sure is that I haven't squashed anything or stretched anything too much. So I'm just going to look at this this chunk and compare it to my reference again. So boom, boom. Oh yeah. Knuckle to bottom of hand, this pinky to above the thumb. So this is all squashed in quite a lot. So I have to ask myself, what should I do? Right? Where does the fix need to happen? If I get rid of this, does this stuff all work? And the answer there is, yeah, kinda. That contour could be a little better. It kind of works. Like the distance here from pinky to there is the size of the thumb. Size of the thumb, pinky to there. This is pretty, the sizes here are pretty okay. All the way to the pinky, the edge of the thumb is to the edge of that, could be out a little bit. So we have an issue here. I'm going to lengthen this finger. Question is, did that help? I think it helped some. Now I'm running into an issue with this finger. It's like if I keep pushing this way, I'm going to be going bing right on the edge of the page. So if I were doing this in a full drawing, I might opt to fix it that direction because I have a lot more space to do that here. In yours, chances are it'll be part of a bigger thing. You won't be so close to the edge here, but you know, maybe you will be. It's also the size of that. How long is that finger overall? It is the same size as this. On this finger, I really noticed this kind of overlapping situation. Maybe I'll just do this and then we can, well, I'll get rid of the parts that don't matter after the fact. So it's like this continuous thing there is really helpful in describing this finger. And then I can just get rid of the parts. The parts that don't matter. That's probably too strong. There we go. That overlapping is something that's really finger-like, that sort of swooping, because we have creases that go around our fingers. When they're coming at you, they tend to wrap around the finger, so to speak. Make that wrist just a little bit stronger, as in thicker. And a little bit more believable here in the shape of it. I love those tendons that go down. These flexor tendons, they're great. They're a great addition to your hand drawing. All right, I'm going to ditch the vine charcoal. I'm still not super stoked about these fingers, but I'm going to move on and we'll address them as we go. There's a lot of other stuff that I do feel pretty good about, so. Because I've done that previous work, now I can focus on my line and really just playing with the line. if you saw the instructional video, you know that I really enjoy making hands more gnarly than they should be. So if you see me doing that, we'll call it a stylistic choice. Kayla's asking if I want you to draw tendons if they show up in your reference. If it makes sense to. Like, you can see that this just adds a sense of solidity to that hand. It's like structural bit. So if it makes sense to, like if it's a prominent, like if you have someone squeezing a fist, you're really going to want that tendon to show up because it's a squeeze. Anytime you squeeze, those tendons, they show, right? They can really add to the sense of what you're doing, to the believability of the hand. But it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, that there should be a tendon showing here, but I don't see it. Minus points. At this point, I'm really just playing with these contours. thinking about how the hand feels maybe. Trying to get that organic feel to it. All right, there's some cool stuff happening here. I kind of want to make a little more clear. There's like there's a muscle that flexes right along the edge here, and it makes a little pouch right there. So I'm going to grab some vine charcoal and sort of show the edge of that. Kind of goes up like that, and then it's got these little parts that stick down. That's super oversimplified in vine charcoal, but now that I have that map, I can come in and say, okay, I've got a little bit of shape there. Okay, we won't carry on too long with this, but you get the idea. Now I can come in and start rendering. This is on gray paper, so I can really start adding light and value to this basic structure. But this shows that I was thinking about, thinking about the different parts of the hand, thinking about the contours, the come and go line, sort of line variety, and so on. You notice I saved those clear contour lines for the last bit. So at least after I get the structure and stuff measured and where I'd like it to be, then is the time to come in with a line. And if you've already done that groundwork of blocking stuff in appropriately, then it's really just play with those lines. It makes it a lot easier to get good line work, good line variety, because you don't have to guess where your line is going. You just kind of go where you already mapped out. Let me look. Hey, Joel. Joel asked the question, did I go to a figurative art academy? What's really important when you study on your own? I did not go to a figurative art academy. So I went to a state college to start. I'm going to pick this foot. And then I went to Tulane University for a grad degree. And then other than that, it's kind of been, it's a combination of stuff learned in school and studying on my own. As far as what is important, here we go. When studying on your own, I think, I guess I can just speak from my own personal experience that when you're studying, when you're on your own steam, it's important not to get, the heck just happened to my image? It's important not to get, to feel like things are beneath you, I guess, or like you've already done something. Maybe that's one thing. Like, oh, I don't need to do whatever it is. Or, sorry, my reference image that I'm using has disappeared on me. I think consistency is the most important thing. So I think there we go. What the heck? Sorry, my reference. I can't talk and mess with my reference at the same time, apparently. There we go. So yeah, consistency. I think you can be like, okay, so I did, like for, in this case, we're doing hands and feet. Okay, I've done a hand and a foot. What's next? And it's like, you kind of, what's next is more of that and more of that again and more of that again and more of that again. So just being consistent. What I will add to that is having some sort of direction on what you want out of your art. So I spent a lot of time agonizing over, like I spent a ton of time wanting to be photorealistic, as close to a photo as I can get. And so I sort of strove for that. So I'm going to do a foot here. I'll talk as I do this foot. It's a similar story to the hand. So yeah, for a lot of time I chased that photorealism thing, right? Like if I could only get it to look like the photo, then, I will have arrived or whatever. And that's fine. And there are whole artists whose whole careers are kind of like centered around playing with the idea of the photo, and so on. But I kind of found that wasn't the thing for me. And so then what, like it's easy to get addicted to the idea, I guess that's the right way to put it, that like the wow, look at me effect, like, oh, how did you do that? That's a whatever, you're so amazing. It's like the wow, look at me thing. And that's fine. I think all of us as artists want something like that. We want people to appreciate what we do. But it's like, it almost felt like learning a really cool magic trick or something, And in my grad school, it was weird to get feedback that was like, wow, that's really amazing. What else? And I found that I didn't have a great answer to what else. And so I had to spend some time thinking about, okay, well, what else? And that led me into abstraction and what abstraction is about and non-objective process-based artwork and that kind of stuff. And that's nice. But then, doing that, I was like, it's kind of like, it's just whatever I say goes kind of a thing, like people are less likely to feel like they have the right, unless there may be other artists, to question you because it's abstract. What do they know? And I think abstract art in some ways has that built into it where it's really easy for people to feel like they're not schooled enough, or they're not artsy enough, or whatever it is. They're not in the know enough to really have a anything to say. So whatever the artist says goes. And I'm like, that didn't feel great to me either. So eventually I came back around to like, okay, I derive my, so this is a long way to answer your question, Joel. I derive my satisfaction in art from the relation that I have to my experience in the physical world, observing things and understanding things and seeing things. And so my drawings, and particularly with the human body, like it's just the most fascinating machine to me. And so I gravitate towards it. And there's like this nod towards nature, like, hey, I'm at the risk of sounding too philosophical or whatever, I'm along the ride here for however long I'm here for, experiencing all of these crazy things, seeing all this stuff. And there's a lot going on, more than I could ever hope to like get a grasp on myself. But my drawing and painting and so on, it's kind of an effort to just sort of understand, I guess, my visual experience and what's around me, and to try not to take things for granted. So what that's going to do for me, coming back to your question, which is like, what do you suggest for someone who's, if you're on your own studying, is like, what attracts you to art? Like, what type of art attracts you, I guess I should say. And rather than, I guess, mimicking other people who do that style or who approach art in that way, some mimicking is good, but on top of that, can you sort of break apart what their concerns are? Do they share the same concerns you do? What do you really want to do with your art? And for some people, and I don't want that to sound like you need to have some noble purpose in art making or else it's not worth it, because I think a lot of artists feel like if they don't have something political to say, then they shouldn't be making art. And I think that's a flippin' tragedy, because political art is one thing, like art that says something is one thing, but you can say a bunch of different things, So maybe the thing you want to say is, like, I know an artist that paints landscapes, and they're awesome. Man, I love his landscapes to death. His name's Michael Workman. And he says, you know what, like, I'm this old, like, small town, backwoods kind of guy, but there's a lot of beautiful stuff, like when I wake up at 4 a.m. and I'm in the hills on my four-wheeler and I see this sunrise hit the trees just so or whatever, and it strikes me. And so I'm just trying to share that with people. And he does, for me, he does. It's like, I've done that. I've woken up like that, seen that stuff. And then to see his paintings, it's like brings it all back for me. So his artist statement is like, there's beautiful stuff in the world. Here's my take on some of it. Anyway, you'll get, this is my problem, Joel. I'll get long-winded answers. A place to start is what attracts you, what are you drawn to, and then do copy it, or like, do let it influence you and try to do versions of it and so on. But don't just do that. Try to get to the bottom of why that attracts you, and even if it just gives you oomph to carry on doing it, you'll have some solid justification for what you do, and it can help guide your practice. So like for me, Why would you draw the figure over and over and over and over and over again? Always the figure, always the figure. I'm not an animator. I'm not a, you know, why this fixation on the figure? And to me, it's like, I'm fascinated. I know this about myself. When I was younger, I used to take things apart to try and figure out how they worked, and I broke a lot of stuff, space heaters and TVs and all that stuff. But eventually, I did kind of figure out how they work, and I could put them back together, and just the way machinery works is super fascinating to me. And then the human body to me is like the pinnacle of that. And so I just derive endless satisfaction from trying to understand and get to the bottom of, not get to the bottom of, trying to understand how this flipping thing works, how it's all interconnected, and it's me and it's you and it's all of us. And when you dig into it, it's just so familiar and so fascinating and so complicated but efficient, and so why not draw it? Drawing is like it's a path to understanding. I think it's like, you want to understand something, learn how to draw it well. You really need to understand, you really need to know about it if you want to draw it effectively. So then the question is like, what's that for you? If it's, maybe abstraction makes sense because what you're interested in is paint itself and this substance that we've been using and how it layers and the visual phenomenon of transparent and opaque and all of that. What happens when you get gravity involved? If you're interested in figure drawing specifically, and I'm bringing this up because I'm just drawing a foot right now. I'm drawing figure stuff right now. Getting in a life class is really a good thing to do. It's going to have you drawing from real observation. Like drawing from a photo is okay, but when you're looking at a model in real life, your eyes are so much better than a camera could ever hope to be because you've got two streams of input. It's as high fidelity as you're capable of seeing. You're getting three-dimensional information because you've got two eyeballs. And the model moves, so you have to kind of accept that in your drawing and learn to trust yourself and know that you can draw that drawing regardless. So that's my over-the-top and long-winded version of my answer. For something specifically actionable right now, I would say make sure you have a basic understanding of perspective, a basic understanding of symmetry and how to construct something, working from the bigger information to the smaller information. Have a basic understanding of light and shadow and how they behave. You could spend a lot of time just on those things. There are some weird shapes in this foot, by the way. So like this overlap, this tendon of the pinky going up into this kind of bulgy area. The lateral malleolus is here, medial malleolus is there. The overlaps are super important on this drawing because the shapes are so strange. They're almost all you've got. I'm going to put some cast shadow in here just to give the foot a sense that it's on the ground. I'm going to come back in with my carbon pencil here and just get a little bit of stronger contours. Oh yeah, that Frazetta look is really smooth edges. He's got that almost airbrushed look, airbrush quality, but Frazetta was big on the musculature. If anatomy, then definitely you want to study anatomy. Understand what's under the skin there and the basic shapes, you know, like it'd be really good to study Frazetta and just pay attention to the type of shapes that he uses. Chiaroscuro is going to be big there too. So like light side to cast or to core shadow, that light side halftone core shadow and then reflected light roundness is he really heavily used in Frazetta as well. Super smooth transitions and stuff. Again, almost like airbrush. All right, I'm going to come in with a white charcoal pencil here and give myself some, like this foot's coming down and then shelving towards me right through here. So I'm going to add some, it's not super light in the reference image, but I'm going to add some here just to give that foot a sense of fall off. Maybe add some value going up the foot. It's going to be subtle, but it'll be a start. Toes are so weird. kind of hanging out. Toads spend a lot of their time crammed in a shoe. So unless you're like a forever flip-flop wearer, people's toes will tend to be kind of crunched up. And it's something I quite enjoy, actually, how sort of crunched up and janky toes can be. All right, figure folks, I think that is going to do it. It is 9 o'clock. So similar story to, so this is a foot in a weird position. You may find this position to make sense to you though. Feet are weird because they just kind of glump there. They don't inherently do a whole lot of interesting stuff, though they can. So if you're grabbing a foot with both hands or something, that can look really interesting. Try in your project that you've got with 4 hands, 4 feet with some kind of story aspect. Think about what you can do with hands and feet to make it more interesting. Hands are going to be interesting because we communicate with them so much. They do so many different things. Feet, you'll be like, I did a foot this way, then I did a foot that way. Now what? Right? Try and put a little thought and a little bit of, that's why there's like the storytelling aspect of it. Sort of put some thought into how you're arranging things. I would encourage you, if you're going to render this, to take a photo that has decent lighting. So my reference photo here, not great lighting. I can see some light information, but it's kind of like ambient light from one side and soft light from the other side, and there's not a lot of strong sense of shadow. I can kind of piece together the light situation, but with a single light source and a good setup, you can really set yourself up to render really well, and that can really sell your drawing impressively. So think about that as you're putting yours together. Think about, at least I'll just tell you the way I think about drawing hands and feet, as I explained in the videos as well, is very much the way I think about drawing the figure, which is starting with that gesture. How's it going to sit on the page? You can see here's my whole 18 by 24 page, and the foot is sized for the page. And I knew that within the first 1 minute of drawing. I knew how roughly where things were going to be. Through the structuring part of things, thinking about the geometric aspect of things, thinking about the shapes and the straight line blocking, the measuring, all of that, finally landing on a nice contour line drawing, and then adding to that with some value, right? Some light shadow information. That's kind of the arc as I see it. So for the project that I have you doing, up to contour line drawings, a nice contour line drawing with good line variety, you can leave it there. You've got 4 hands, 4 feet. That'll be, adding rendering to all of that is something you can do if you feel really inspired to do so. It can really look awesome, but not entirely necessary. And if it's a scale between adding the rendering or doing a good proportional job with good line variety and awesome contours, go proportion and awesome contours all the way. Okay, I'm calling it at 9:04. Kayla, thanks for sticking in there. It's an hour of listening to me jabber as I draw. But I was glad you were able to make it. All right, we'll see you all, YouTubers. Thanks, Kayla. This will be up as soon as YouTube's done processing it. It'll be available for rewatch as well. So good night, everyone.